Chill here with Sirius Dallas Moon. This is Ascendant and Midheaven. 29 degrees Pisces conjoining Neptune, and Midheaven 29 degrees Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter 25 degrees Cancer retrograde. Sun is conjoining Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, and Mars conjoining Antares in Sagittarius. So our Mars day, I will bring Antares energy into the forefront, and it's a great time to advertise Christopher Warnock for making that talisman for spiritual protection, warding off evil and demons. And I'm going to kindly honor Antares as I look into a chart that I looked at before in a previous channel. But this name is very, very relevant to worldly events. So, Aleister Crawley was born in 12 October 1875. And we have a C-rated chart. He died 1 December 1947. Caused disease. What disease? Occultist, writer, chess player, astrologer. And again, we don't have his chart with the ascendant in midheaven certain. Several things that pop. First of all, about Aleister Crowley, his occult, his personality that cult tradition. I know that's not how people like to think about him, but hey, there are certain people that think about Marquis de Sade as the founder of King Society, or 50 Shades of Grey as a classical BDSM. How should I say that? That's like that's like saying Lolita was a romance movie, okay, or rom-com. That is, if people want to go that route, at the very best, it's complete lack of discernment, or it could derive from the very occult that has its roots in nowadays practices of mind control, namely MK Ultra, MK Often. A lot of people like to talk about Mossad, Shabak, Israeli intelligence is basically also an occultist that inspired Adolf Hitler. And yeah, that's a can of worms that needs to be put out there when we talk about the Epstein list, or the pedosexuality of ICC judges. Them it's like jurists. Them it's like, ooh, not me. Not they didn't mention me this time. They skipped over my head. So a couple of things that pop. First of all, there's another Chiron return for Aleister Crowley, where definitely we can see, and Aries going over his Chiron, we can see how his wound around identity that killed quite some people with 22 Mars in Capricorn, and Saturn in its home sign opposing Uranus on the degree. And those are accurate degrees, they're not fast-moving planets. He initiated a structure through his wound of identity that killed masses upon masses in some sort of a personality rebellious structure of ritual, with the sun in Libra, has to do, is activated at a time where the world is rebalancing, which is why he was prevalent in the occultism of civil wars, Adolf Hitler, and Israeli Mossad. Either Mossad or Shabak, I'm not acquainted with what type of intelligence. I'm just like acquainted with being exposed to that type of dumbfuckery. And oh no, that's as an academic, I think the only fit analogy to torturing a human being to nearly death several times, having them doing that to others when they are a child, and then summoning entities to possess them. I think this is where the academic notion of demonic possession, um, and an understanding that by perpetual extreme trauma there is a dissection of the personality, susceptibility to mind control, um, and many phenomena that can be associated with demonic possession. The technology to do with torture is also the interface uh, to do with the technological sorcery. So I can definitely see the foundation of that in this chart. Um, and Aries around his Chiron, again, bringing the wound around personality death cults. We see it with Epstein. We see it with Bilderberg and Belzen. Okay? It's basically a psychosexual wound that's created by extreme form of ritual abuse. And and creates a myriad of basically decentralized form of ritual structure that is used as rebellious personalities, supposedly to change the order of things. However, right now we are seeing the how this wound is basically a part of the change in society right now. Um, the survivors of MK Ultra, Montauk, MK Often, and as an astrologer and a person that tends to astrological magic myself, I'm dealing with that, okay? That is beyond horrid. Um, okay? I'm not saying that elements from the telema cannot be taken and be used benefically. Heck, I work with Beta per se, that's considered the head of Satan, or Al Ghul in Arabic. Um, and no, she's not about just destruction and dead bodies upon dead bodies. Hey, but if people rape, that's how it's gonna translate, you know. um, it's about boundary setting to that. Yes, I don't sacrifice things for better per se because it's antithetical to the principle of sacrifice. Um, but I am aware that mundanely, Beta per se, when we had Sedna conjoining Beta per se, it was one of the planetary positions or yogas that participated in the timeline of COVID. And it was trining Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn conjunction, the triple conjunction by sign, and even by decan. Um, and that was the onset of a global military operated military, the NATO. From Wuhan, uh, allegedly. There goes our 5%. Um, that I was jabbing Mark for an entire year before connecting the dots. It's such a Neptunian. It's such a Neptune square. um, and I was like trying to psychologically decipher myself. What's underneath the jabs? Okay, it's a Neptune Mars conjunction. There's something underneath. There's something underneath. What's that? You pretty much named all of that, but you just don't connect the dots. So Yeah, some laughter sounds like crying, and that's understandable. Funnily enough, Aleister Crawley had Venus conjoining Spica. Um, my condolences to all the people that, and this is a surefire proof that you can take the most benevolent of fixed stars, Spica, okay? The orator, the eloquent, fairness in trade, um, fairness in jurisdiction, and turn it into something that is absolutely not. I guess if somebody would look at how the chart of Israel is being used by dark occultists, and I'm being extremely tender here, then that would explain a lot of stuff. How did that country with a midheaven Procyon and Spica ascendant became so involved in global worldly chaos for of its own citizens? Okay, that the most that suffer other than Palestinians is Israelis themselves. Um, Rahu 7 degrees Aries, Ketu 7 degrees Libra, Jupiter in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Neptune 1 degree Taurus, and Pluto 23 degrees Taurus. Pluto conjoining Beta Persei here. And we have the occult, and unfortunately a part of that occult has a Beta Persei story where children are kidnapped, tortured, raped, going into demonic possession, okay? And are being used to consolidate wealth. And here the Venus Spica takes a very, very powerfully malign turn as those children are being used to consolidate wealth on oil in the land. And this is already the timestamp from Aleister Crowley's chart itself. So much so that I ponder about him being one of those children. Like there's just something here that is that old. Okay, there wouldn't be a reason that he would be so demonically possessed had he not been extremely tortured himself. Lilith is close to Antares, 8 degrees Sagittarius. Moon, I wouldn't necessarily say this is the 22nd degree of Pisces, last decan of Pisces, and not ruling any visible planets so far. I do want to see where Eris sits here, because there would probably, my prediction is that Eris would create a certain connection, even harmonious connection with this Pluto. And I think she would be at the end of Pisces at this time, so Aries. I will put Banks here as well, because he was used by bankers as well. Urania, that would be the astrology. And where is Osiris would be relevant here. And of course Aries, Hybris. Lucifer is very relevant. I think he was probably really associated with Satanists, kind of an Anton LaVey with occultism. Again, I'm not profoundly aware of all the Anton LaVey which probably is going to be very relevant. But that's the genre that we're talking about now. Hybris conjuncting Jupiter in Scorpio. Banks 17 degrees Scorpio, Osiris 26 degrees Scorpio, Urania 28 degrees Scorpio. Nothing that I see conjuncting that in particular. Rockefeller and Capricorn, again, nothing there. Aries 12 degrees Pisces, which would not be creating any aspect with this Pluto. It would be sextiling, nay, it would not be creating. It is trining Mercury, and Mercury does rule alchemy, however, kind of sextiling Ketu and around trining Ket, and no, it's not even doing that. It's inconjuncting Ketu. Okay. I would predict that Aries to be way more prominent in this chart. She is trining Mercury, which would be his alchemical qualities that are ruled by this 22 Mars. In a sextile with Pluto and the Moon, so it's, yeah, I mean, but it does mean that his alchemy skills would be transformative, and Jupiter here is also in Scorpio. Very indirect. It's not in our faces. It's not completely unrelated. There's this bisextile with the Moon, Mars, and Pluto. Pluto Beta per se, very prominent placement here. Why don't I see the mystic rectangle? I know there's a mystic rectangle in his chart. Let's go back. No. Let's go back to this chart. I'm missing the mystic rectangle. There is a mystic rectangle here, I know that. Maybe with the ascendant? Then it would be air and water. Yeah, with the ascendant it would be air and water, but we don't see it. So, now here's the thing. Without knowing a little bit about Aleister Crawley, we won't really be able to read this chart. We would see that Pluto with Beta per se is probably creating a deep transformation, probably to do with occultism and sexuality, can give all the things that we don't like about the dead sex cults. Chiron in Aries is just Chiron in Aries. There's a wound around identity, and that can create some sort of assassination with Mars. Saturn-Uranus is prominent here. Saturn-Uranus opposition. Saturn in its home sign is definitely prominent. Neptune-Jupiter opposition gives us some sort of a mythical beliefs to do with alchemy or the occult with Scorpio here. There's a mythical occultist in that sense. Lucifer at 29 degrees Pisces would give us predictive qualities regarding where the Satanism is going. Okay, Lucifer can be associated with Luciferianism, and he would predict the trends of belief uh, years ahead. And this is indeed in the 8th house, so he could identify and predict certain trends in occultism. And indeed, he is considered a mythical occultist, dark occultist, um, the type of things that people get curious about and regret the moment. Gordon, wait, yeah, I have a colleague that tends to astrological magic, and he says that anybody going into the Telema or the Solomon type of initiations, or Aleister Crawley, that is not completely psychopathic or sociopathic, comes out of that phase. But the nature of these things is that they kidnap children. And they mix that lovelily with esoterics, so Kabbalah, and throw a very, if something was not twisted, they're going to make it twisted. And if something was twisted, they're going to add another twist and put it in. And that's basically the rituals behind the wars, the civil wars, the wealth consolidation on natural resources, the Epstein list, the Dutro lists, the things you don't like about Israel, um, that insider note, Israelis are also kind of sick of it. Those that aren't in it can't stand it. Um, and let me tell you something, even those that in it, I believe, can't really stand it. But then they switch their personalities. And this is beyond not funny. Saturn Uranus opposition is unusual death, unusual type of Kundalini rise, unusual structure to Kundalini rise, which would express in the personality and tip the scale. Now, nothing here works like a normal chart because of the ritual practices, okay? So Venus Spica is not working like a Venus Spica, which means, okay, um, we can say that in a roundabout way it would bring the necessity to change the court system regarding women, because women en masse had to um, clear themselves from demonic possession and psychic attacks by these cults. So there's just something that in a roundabout way gives women right to vote and so on and so forth. But this is because the nature of these occultistic practices is summoning chaos, and chaos will bring clarity. Okay, it's kind of like nature works albeit of Aleister Crowley. But the chart in itself, Pluto here is suspicious, Saturn, Uranus is suspicious. This Libra stellium absolutely doesn't look like a chart of a dark occultist. Okay, particularly not when it's ruling Pluto. Chiron is around Andromeda constellation, which literally means kidnapping into real estate, where ritual death. Okay, Mars. The bad side about Mars being inside of its exaltation Capricorn is Saturn also rules ritual and death, and Mars rules action. So killing, ritual murder, that took part in real estate by people being kidnapped there. And that's simply like, if I would just see this chart, there are many things I could say about this chart, but when I read it as a chart of, then I can see how that translates into. Okay, for example, Chiron Andromeda was both the kidnapping of and the returning of all the kidnapped, including the cold cases of kidnapped people in 7th October. Okay, so there was a dual, there were several ways in which that was translating into, but it's also a pandemic of kidnapped people worldwide right now. And Chiron, for example, Aries is also the confusion around who is doing the mind control behind each and every member of the Epstein list. Mercury, Jupiter in Scorpio. Jupiter Scorpio would take the philosophical quests into a deeply psychological and occultistic realm. Natural to see that in a chart of an occultist. 2019 we had. No, 2019 Jupiter was also already in Capricorn. 2017 we had Jupiter in Scorpio. And that was the year of the Me Too. So big issues about cults, narcissistic abuse became a DSM pathology. Okay, narcissistic abuse. I don't remember how they called it afterwards, syndrome or whatnot. Okay, that would be the following years, but that was the big issue there. The tipping of the scale. Now there is definitely something, at the same time, this chart could as well be a chart of a person who would be a ritual abuse survivor and bring justice to the way the ritual abuse abuses the feminine in order to create wealth, and then to disempower the very people that their energy was used to create that wealth, namely women and children and young boys. So that could absolutely be a chart of a person who tips the scale in favor of ritual abuse survivors. Evidently, that was not the case. Now, to the defense of Aleister Crawley, he was born in 1875. He was kind of a Dutro, okay? So it very likely means that he was mind controlled, that he was raped, and that he practiced his occultism and refined it from within that framework. And okay, which would be because 1875 is, way younger than the entire oil industry, let alone the aristocracy. So I wouldn't ascribe to him the root of all evil, but he definitely refined it to to an artistic, to a mythically artistic, okay, Neptune 1 degree Taurus, mythically artistic innovation that unfortunately in a roundabout way, did bring more women rights because it simply killed all the men. it's it's too complicated to explain that, and all the slaves and those who enslaved, because the masters were slaves and so on. But again, he was not exempt to the Rosicrucians or the orders, and he did not invent any of these secret societies. Um, he definitely refined, he definitely created Telema, he definitely was a cult leader. Um, he definitely brought that cult to the juristic area and diplomatic relations. He definitely used rebellious personas to tip the scales of the world. I can definitely see how the Luciferian theme of the darkness and the light and enlightenment by doing dark things played out here. Neptune and Pluto were not sextiling yet. And yet, upon Gladio, um, we see that his mythical influence over the type of occultism that the world still suffers from today, which is extreme torture, extreme violation of human rights. And those are the decision makers, okay? So the children that nobody came to save, because nobody even knew that that was an issue, particularly because they were from the bloodlines of the elite. He could have had a Templar bloodline with his Mars ruled by Saturn and Saturn in his home sign. Okay, kind of like a worldly ancestry of decentralized something something. So that goes to the type of JP Morgan bloodlines when it comes to banking, but also um, a bloodline of scientists, revolutionary, um, but could be a Templar, like Crusades could have to do with that. Crusades, I'm getting in intuition here. Why am I getting Crusades? Neptune in Taurus can be a crusade over the land, but why am I getting Crusades here? Something to do with Crusades. I don't know. Luciferian Crusades? The bloodline of the Crusades? Very likely. I know that a lot of these people were born as cloned people, and indeed Aries in the eighth house can denote of a person 222. It can denote of a person that was born as a clone. It, well, it would be a nice joke to say that I knew this man is in person, the replica of this man in person, but that would just be. There's no point to do that because it's not even a person that can take such a joke. So, um, but yeah, definitely, I met a person that reminded of his energy. Um, I don't know. Like, is it a clone of that person? It's actually possible that they were summoned into the body of an infant in this life. Like, but that would be something that I don't know. Um, Aries in the eighth house can be that the birth, because eighth house is birth. That there was a person that was born in some sort of a cloning birth, because eighth house is both occult and birthing. Um, okay, there's this cosmic gate between and portal between life and death that is using both the occult and natural physical births. Um, if this is indeed the eighth house, Black Moon Lilith in the fifth house could denote of a child that had sexual sovereignty issues around their very birthing, or around his children if he had children, which in that case, granted that there was no sexual sovereignty, would be some sort of an incubus, succubus, or stealing of creative energy, or even womb. But here it can actually denote its sperm because it's Jupiter. So it can be a lot of, a lot of these people were castrated, have their sperm stolen from them before castration. Again, there was an issue about controlling of who is born and so on, and when. So those could be possibilities. By the way, the Aries clips that we had with Rahu Chiron were 7th October. We're starting. That would be over Chiron of Aleister Crawley, and there was use of his dark occult as a mass ritual in Israel and Palestine. And I think even in Iran they blamed Israel for doing demonic activity. It's not that Iranians are saints, the regime. Okay, so um, but that was something that came up, um, and I was myself a victim of. Um, so this is pretty much what is coming to the foreground with this chart. Let's give it a transit. A nice transits chart. So we talked again about this Chiron return, Aries conjoining it, Saturn, Neptune around his moon. Uranus will not be too close to his Pluto. Uranus was on his Pluto at the breakup 7th of October. Um, Rahu to his 8th house, Pluto to his 7th. And Mars went over his Lilith recently. Sun Lilith conjunction is around his Urania and Osiris, which Urania would be the type of astrologer he is. And Osiris is very associated with many things that are going in the world, like that. They have a weird way to tell the myth of Isis and Osiris, and Isis saving Osiris, and Osiris was cut into pieces, and then his penis was missing, and ISIS brought the pieces together to get pregnant. Okay, so we have this kind of something that looks like a cloning birth, and ISIS here has to do with Lilith and the number 17. So 7 and 17. Um, Venus went over his Mercury, and the Moon is crossing his Jupiter. So a lot of signification for Aleister Crowley recently. And when you don't like what Israel is doing, that's the occultist that inspired that. When you don't like what was happening in the Second World War, that's the occultist that inspired that. When you are pondering about certain things that took part in the Civil War, that refinement of the occultist, of this occultist teaching, is what inspired that. Um, Anything you don't like about Israel regarding Epstein, that's the occultist that inspired the rituals. Um, so when people are raving over the telema, that's the thing that they're neglecting in their ideation. Okay? Again, like I said, people thinking that Marquis de Sade invented sadomasochism, which is, uh, you know, there is the truth, there is 12 o'clock from the truth. It is sharp 12 o'clock from the truth. And that 12 o'clock from the truth is really not what any type of kinky society is about. If it's actually kinky society and not a type of ritual abuse. So, like many charts, I cannot say that this is an easy chart. And having an outer planet on Beta Persei is being a mark of a generation that deals with really challenging things. Okay? Saturn and its home sign, people said the list of things that people said that they prefer to experience than reliving Saturn in its home sign is impressive and fucking triggering. Um, Saturn opposing Uranus is, the late 60s had this with opposition to Pluto, and you know um, one of the not you know it's easy to look away because we think about Pluto and Neptune, and Uranus only goes 7 years through a sign. But hey, COVID would introduce us to the period where Uranus squared Saturn for 2 years, and the world and oh, by the way, there was the war in Ukraine, but it's kind of like, oh, COVID, lockdown, COVID. Nobody's able to go to the dentist. Oh, some dentists are actually kind of Dr. Mengele's. But um, nobody really trusts anybody after the shots. But then again, oh, maybe there will be like, oh, maybe it's good that we didn't have like golden teeth or anything because it looks like Holocaust o'clock and everybody went to the concentration camps. I mean, if there weren't the Nazis, and even if they were, um, and then it's like, oh, suddenly really war in Ukraine. When will the war be over? Which one? What do you mean, which one? 7th October 2023. And this is a reminder that Sudan is still burning, so is Congo. And we're heading 2027 eclipses, which would be quite prominent with an August eclipse. I don't know if it's 2026 or 7, that August eclipse of 6 minutes and the world goes dark. That's, there is the three-eye atlas that, yeah, I mean, there are events. There are events. So, yes, this chart is difficult. It's not more difficult than other prominent charts. Um, I would not be, I don't use astrology as profiling. Could this, solar, Pluto Sol, a line of astrologers would denote of how differently and more positively that chart could play out. Um, but hey, some of them are might be on Epstein lists. I mean, so take that with a grain of salt. And that is Aleister Crowley's chart.